Okay, good. So that's good. Live? Great. Excellent. Thank you. Maybe you stand on this side. That's quite great. Let's move to the side here. No, it's all good.
No, it's all good.
All good. Yeah. Great.
Use this chair.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to a very special Bitcoins in Bali event. This talk is called Going Post-Monetary with Jean-François Noubel. At first, I'd just like to do some brief introduction on behalf of Bitcoins in Bali and talk about what we've been doing the past couple of years to bring about a digital economy here in Ubud in particular and Bali in general. First, we'd like to thank Ubud very much for arranging this space for us, providing us with high quality internet and an air-conditioned room for this event, as well as our meetings that we have every Tuesday from 5 to 6:30 or so. At these meetings, we don't just talk about Bitcoin, we talk about a wide variety of economic issues, not just cryptographic currencies, not just for experts or programmers, but for anyone who's concerned about what's been going on in the economy since the 2008 crash, but also as we see things progressing in the economy, for people from a whole bunch of different countries. So yes, thanks very much to Ubud for hosting us. The Bitcoins in Bali Facebook page is where we meet online. You're all welcome to join. We discuss a whole bunch of different things. We post news articles, and then we discuss them on Tuesdays at our meeting, as well as many other things. Okay, and we work closely with the Bitcoin Indonesia exchange at bitcoin.co.id. It's a very professional exchange, occasionally in the top 10 in the world in terms of Bitcoin trading volume. Indonesia is becoming a very big Bitcoin economy, and we're working here in Ubud to help to strengthen that as well. There are, of course, other exchanges in Indonesia, and you're welcome to look at those other exchanges as well too. But we've received a lot of support, moral support from Bitcoin Indonesia, and we really like what they're doing. They have also built BitBayar, which is an Indonesian BitPay platform, which allows anyone who has an online business to easily accept Bitcoin through very simple WordPress plugins for a whole bunch of e-commerce platforms. I use it for myself in my business, and I've helped other businesses to set this up on their platform. It's very smooth, and it makes sure that you're in compliance with Indonesian law, which is really great. And they also have Toko Bitcoin, where you can buy phone credit, electricity credit, and game vouchers, and other vouchers that you can send to people, which is really fantastic what they've done to make this possible. As you can see on the map here, down in Bali, in the corner here, we have, from what Gary was telling me, we have more Bitcoin accepting businesses in Bali now than in Jakarta and Singapore combined.
Welcome, Gary.
Yeah. And we're doing our best to encourage other businesses to accept Bitcoin, other businesses. So you can buy a wide variety of things, from restaurants, 5-star hotels, tourism programs, jewelry, language classes, a whole bunch of different goods and services. Groceries, yes, with Ubud Direct. You can do many different, you can buy many different goods and services with Bitcoin in Bali now. And so another platform that's coming up is called Connectivize. It's one that I started last year. And it's very similar to what JP is going to be talking about tonight, about going post-monetary.
Yeah.
And tomorrow we'll be talking about it, Connectivize, at 12 o'clock at the Ubud, the entrepreneurial think tank, here from 12 to 1 at Ubud. It would be really great if you're interested in what Jean-François is talking about to come and look at this platform as well too. It's not about going non-monetary, it's about going post-monetary. So Jean-François is going to be speaking about that in detail, but it's just important for us to understand that the internet of the past. If you remember back into the early 90s, if you've used DOS or Commodore or the Apple II, or even just like the very first modems, you'll see that the internet then is very different than the internet that we have now. And the internet we have now is very different than how it's going to be in 3 or 5 years' time. We can credit a lot of that to developments around Bitcoin, not just as a digital currency, but as a blockchain and as a communication protocol. That's going to allow us to create forms of money that are more in line with the real economy and with real people and with what we're really doing, rather than about speculation on markets or military involvement in order to back up the value of the currency of a country with $18 trillion in debt. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jean-François Noubel. And we'll switch to your presentation.
Okay. Just need to connect there. Right. How do we do with the sound? Great. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay. Well, hey, hi.
Hi.
Just a few words about myself. I do research in collective intelligence, and I really have a passion for that, to really understand how life evolves, because collective intelligence really came up as a new research field, a new discipline that allows us how living systems work, how they function. Why are there certain conditions you have, a group of ants or a group of birds or cells or bacteria, and you put them together and you have a new reality emerging, some collective that becomes one, more or less. And of course, in any of these collectives, whether we talk about bacteria or even atoms or cells or complex human societies, we have an economy there. We have exchange of energies, exchange of matter, exchange of lots of different things. So collective intelligence really helps us to understand how those living systems work on many levels, and that includes economics there. How those flows happen within beings or agents or entities, whatever you want to call them. This research field, I really feel passionate about it because it really helps us explore our own evolution. It gives us clues, like a language for social engineering. So far we didn't have any language to explore how our societies will evolve. And now our society evolves, our species evolve, not just society, but our species evolve and creates new forms of organizations that we have never seen so far in the past. And the first thing we need a language to talk about this. And then with the language, then we can start to see stands what exists, and then also move to the next step, do social engineering. And is really think of new forms, just like architects, things that did not exist in the past, that maybe self-engineer ourselves and self-engineers the new societies that we want, not just because they fall on our heads, but because we want them. So I think we have a very interesting, new discipline here. And I propose that before I go into very flesh, email, internet, Facebook, nothing else. Okay, number two, level two, like a little bit of geekiness. Okay, number three, quite geeky. Okay, and number four, super geeky, like coding and okay. All right, thank you. Just for doing this. So we have some kind of balance of everyone. Okay. So, all right. Different forms of collective intelligence. Let's start with the first one, probably the oldest one. We call it swarm collective intelligence. And you can see here, of course, we don't have a swarm of fish, but we have a school of fish, big herds, ant colonies, big herds, when you have a big number of animals together, and you can see at the individual level, one fish doesn't have much freedom there. I mean, you cannot follow the pack. You cannot go where the others go. So either by design or by circumstance, in the swarm collective intelligence context, at the individual level, the individual doesn't have much freedom, but the collective has a huge amount of potential. Look at an ant colony, for instance. The ant itself cannot do many things. It has a very predefined set of actions that it can do. But at the collective level, the ant colony belongs to the smartest, beings we can really look at. Okay. This represents probably the oldest form of collective intelligence. Now we come from the second form of collective intelligence as a species. Oh, sorry, I forgot to ask you. We, as human beings, experience sometimes this form of collective intelligence, like, a street protest, for instance, or the New York Marathon, when you have 10,000 or 30,000 people running in the same direction. Or this, we all, even in Ubud, right? Okay, just look out there, okay? How do we feel when we get locked in our little box called a car? We feel frustrated because, not by design, but because of circumstance, we have a limited margin of freedom. However, you can fill in and fill out a whole city with this kind of collective intelligence. Try to plan that. That would make it a very tough, project to plan. But it happens without someone in central control. Now, we as a human species, we come from this second form of collective intelligence that we call the original collective intelligence. That means kind of the opposite of the previous one. Small group, but highly individualized beings. Monkeys, big cats, elephants, dolphins, some birds, and of course, human beings. Very important to remember that because we have a built-in design, a brain, a structure, a biological structure made to work in this kind of small group called original collective intelligence. And if I transfer that to human beings, here we have a scene, a jazz band that we can look at. And I would like to invite you to share what you, just looking at this picture that I really love, what do you see? What would you tell about what you see? What do you feel? What can you observe?
Different mastery.
Different mastery. Yes.
Everyone is looking at his own instrument.
Everyone looking at his own instrument, right?
No conductor.
No conductor, right? Do we have leadership?
Maybe.
Yes, we certainly have some leadership, but turning leadership, right? Yes.
It's also what's not shown in context. In contrast this picture with the ant farm or the collectivity of cars. So assuming that there's some kind of audience that's looking into this picture.
Right. Okay. However, they could play along in a room, right?
They could, but
They
there's
could.
an assumption that there is
Right.
some kind of invisible audience around.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
Harmony within collaboration.
Sorry.
Harmony within collaboration.
How many within collaboration? Good question. Well, so we have a very important property here, and I'll come back to that quite often in collective intelligence, that we call holopticism. From the Greek words holos, holistic, the whole, and optike, see the whole. And you see, back to our players here, they don't need to see each other, but they know what everyone plays at the same time, but also they have a sense of the whole. They know about the whole. They have the feeling, they have the training for that. And by the way, what makes a good player comes from two things: the technical side, as a good music player, or as a good soccer player, whatever, ball player, first quality, and second quality, a good holoptician. That means someone has a special training to really see and feel the whole, the emerging whole, holopticism. So it has a very important consequence because each of these fellows here know what to do because they have this sense of the whole. So what kind of limitation could we see here in original collective intelligence? When does it stop working?
Too many people.
Right, first limitation, when you have too many people. If you have many musicians, what happens? What kind of structure do we have?
An orchestra.
Yeah.
Yes, we go into symphonic orchestra, right? With someone leading the whole thing, right? Yes. So first limitation, the number. You can have maybe 8 or 12, certainly not 30 in this case. In the village, you may have 30, maybe 50, because it goes slower, but certainly not 500. In a sports team, you may have 8, 12, 15 with rugby, for instance, but certainly not 50, right? So we feel we have some limitations. Okay. Come in.
It needs to be chaired.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Oh, there is a seat here.
You can sit here also if you want.
Sit there.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So, first limitation, number. Second limitation, distance. You need to have the people or the animals together in a biological perception. Otherwise, original collective intelligence doesn't work anymore. Okay? Let's move on. Thousands and thousands of years ago, humanity faced its first big crisis. We don't remember that, and it took hundreds and probably thousands of years, so it looks like a massive scale. So let's travel back and imagine we went from horticulture, hunters and gatherers, to agriculture. That means humans started to settle down, and you had a demographic explosion, and then also an explosion of complexity. That means you started to see, cities rising up, and specialization of labor division, more and more social complexity, and then humanity started to hit a wall of complexity there, in which oral traditions could not deal with that. The biological technology, the natural technologies we had, and the economy that came with it could not work anymore. So either it would collapse, or it would make some kind of quantum leap to the next form of collective intelligence, because original collective intelligence could not work anymore. So what happened? What would you think happened? What key invention made possible the next quantum leap? Writing. Yes, the writing. We came up with a very new technology called the writing, because with the writing, you can take an information through time and space. In original collective intelligence, we need to stand in the same room and in the same space together in order for information to circulate, to flow, right? But with the writing, you can take it way further, transport it by horse, by man, whatever, and also through time. It stays through time because you put it on a support. Okay? You want to sit down somewhere, maybe?
Yeah, I'll just sit here.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Nice. So with the writing came what we call the third form of collective intelligence, pyramidal collective intelligence. Everywhere you look at, whether you look at Mesopotamian or Chinese or pre-Columbian or the Egyptians, it doesn't matter. You have this kind of social structure where at the top you have a God-given kind of power, and then at the second level you have the high castes, the priests and nobles, and then on the third level you would have the traders, the merchants, and the other level here you would have people from the land, the farmers and the herders, and then at the bottom you have the unskilled workers, the slaves, the untouchable, the low-wage people in the industry today. People who just pay the minimum amount of money and they do whatever you want them to do. So it started with this kind of societies that we call pyramidal collective intelligence because of that. Centralized power, chains of command, labor division, castes, and scarce currencies. Scarce currencies. I'll come back to that. But you had an economy before with the original collective intelligence, and we have a new kind of economy there with pyramidal collective intelligence. And I will come back to that. But first I want to give you the overview of these different forms of collective intelligence and what kind of economies play inside these forms of collective intelligence. So pyramidal collective intelligence, if I look at it on a more formal way, it works a little bit this way. You know, you have a kind of a pyramid of original collective intelligence here. You know, for instance, in a company, you would have the decision makers here, okay? And then you would have the departments and services here, and so on. It goes this way, okay, with the chain of command. And you have the silos, of course, you know, with the different parts that may not, you know, this one may not communicate much with this one, and this one may not communicate much with this one, and so on. As we know, the corporate world today, governments, administrations, armies, you know, any kind of big churches as well, big organizations today work upon pyramidal collective intelligence. Okay. So what did it accomplish? Well, first, it accomplished a new level of complexity. You cannot build, you know, pyramids and cars and satellites and weapons with original collective intelligence. You need this, you know, big thing called pyramidal collective intelligence. It could put lots and lots of people together to do incredible big things for the worse and the better. Okay. Also, it created something called linear time. That means you see the world in reality not as a circular time, but through linear time on which you can make sequential projections. You predict the future, and you make, you know, you can decide in 5 years from now we build this building here, or in 10 years we have this church or this city, or we have invaded the next country, whatever, for the worse and the better. Let's move on. What limitations would you see in pyramidal collective intelligence? I asked the same question that I asked for original collective intelligence. Now, in pyramidal collective intelligence, where does it start to hit a wall? Yes?
One example historically could be, for example, warfare.
Warfare?
Differences between pyramid structures. Ancient Rome, for example, is a very pyramid structure, and they hit a wall when barbarians, the Huns, the Ostrogoths started to invade, which they had a much more less linear, less pyramidal structure to their societal organizations.
Right. So you say something more distributed against something more centralized.
So, for example, when the Huns and the nomadic groups from the north and the east came to invade ancient Rome,
right.
You had the more symmetry structures that you just described versus the more fluid, distributed structures of the more nomadic groups. And you know, it's certainly from one example. That's just one example.
Okay. Yes.
To take out the leadership, there can be chaos. It's very dependent on leaders.
You take out the leadership, and it can lead to chaos, or at least big changes, right?
Yeah.
For instance, you put one bullet in the head of a president, and
Things are up
boom.
again. Yeah.
Right, just a few grams of lead or whatever metal in the head of someone, and that can change the whole thing.
There are other weak points in terms of communication. So in the system, there's some real weak links. You know, if the top three can't get together, then nothing falls apart. Like there are not a lot of alternative systems of communication cross links. So it has to kind of go up the chain. If there's something that's broken, it's going to be a problem.
Exactly. So you have, for instance, asymmetrical connection. Also, you know, top to bottom and bottom to top. It doesn't work the same way. Also, these structures have a very poor capacity to adapt. Okay. Someone wanted to say something. I saw her hand raised. Anything else about the limitations of pyramidal intelligence? Yes.
I was thinking about the loss of sense of purpose.
The loss of sense of purpose between the bottom and the.
At the bottom.
Yes. Right.
You're not really utilizing everybody's ability in that structure. It's just
Right.
everyone's in a very limited
Right.
role.
Yes. So limited abilities from people. I mean, you just use labor division, but we don't want to know if you do know other things than what people ask you to do, for instance.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yes.
I think there's also a potentially a side product would be a dependence on levels of codification. We have more structures, and we have to develop laws and much more strict rules around how things work in order for, just to build on what someone said about the adaptation, lack of adaptation to certain roles. We have to develop codification, a set of frameworks and laws in which to govern what certain types of roles work and what certain things.
Exactly. So if I say it also with my words in collective intelligence, it has a very poor plasticity. It has, you have hard-coded structure, and you always need to add new stuff and stuff on top of new stuff and so on. Yes.
Power corrupts.
How
That's for
corrupt?
me, power corrupts.
Power corrupts,
The
right.
biggest limitation of such system
Yes.
is very soon it's about power, not about evolution anymore.
Yes.
I was going to say a similar thing, the power imbalance. So
Power
it
imbalance,
has
right.
power for some at the expense of the masses.
Right.
Decision.
So now, I would like to, before I move, no, I should move to the next form, and then we'll go into questions about economy, because we don't want to go that far into the forms of collective intelligence, but I would like us to go into what kind of economies play in those different forms of collective intelligence. So, what difference would you see between this picture on the left and this picture on the right? Just for, if you don't see very well, you have many connections between those pictures here. The dots represent pictures of individuals. Here you have names. So here you can see connections this way, and here you have thousands and thousands of connections out there, but you probably can't see it very well on the picture. What difference can you see between the two?
Some different, you can see an immediate structure on the left, so you can follow a pattern, and you can get some pattern recognition of, these people are connected to these, and the other one, it's a friggin' nightmare to figure out if you change something here, how's it going to impact you, and what the structure is, what the connections are.
Okay. What else?
There are subgroups form some pattern.
Sorry.
You have subgroups forming patterns.
Subgroups forming patterns on which one?
I'm on the right one.
On the right one. On this one. Okay.
Yeah, it seems like it's a lot more tied on one side,
Uh-huh.
a lot more spread out on the other side.
I mean, to say a little bit more about that structure, like, for example, you could understand the impact of taking out a section on the one on the left. If you
Right.
took out these 5 names, what would that mean for the overall structure? You look at that and you'd be like, I'm not sure if it's going to impact or not, right?
Which one has more peer-to-peer connection, would you say? The left one or the right one? The right one. Yeah. So on the left one, you have a structure of pyramidal collective intelligence, just displayed differently, but you can still see the silos and some sections that don't communicate with one another. And on the right one, you have the fourth form of collective intelligence, the one that we witnessed today, that just appeared a few years ago, that we call holomidal collective intelligence. Holomidal, that means a holistic structure. And I won't say much about it because we play in this today. It just looks like the brain structure, or the rhizome, when you go in the forests. What we can observe, you can see that you don't have a CEO cell in our brains, for instance, that speaks to the VPs, and then you have a chain of command between cells. It doesn't work this way. Those complex adaptive systems have a very different set of rules that makes them self-emergent, self-organizing, self-connecting, self-adapting, and more with all the autopoietic qualities that we know of complex living systems. So I could go on and on about what we could foresee. I mean, we have lots of things we can find on the internet, the peer-to-peer structures and 3D printers and all the transhumanist vision, whether you believe it or not, doesn't matter, but lots of views that we can see about the next world. But now I would like to step back a little bit and get into the very flesh of our talk here, our reflection here. What kind of economies would you describe between original collective intelligence? So let me step back. here original collective intelligence, pyramidal collective intelligence, and holomidal collective intelligence. How do you think the economies work there, or may work in the future?
Well, the capacity of scale.
Capacities of scale.
This feels like kind of autocratic communism, like the pyramidal-wise plan of control. Instead of communist.
What kind of economy do we have in original collective intelligence? It has a name.
Also,
Or
No.
whatever.
I call it a free market.
Gift economy. Yes, right. We have gift economy. That means you don't need the condition of reciprocity. Like, I give you something only and only if you have an equal quantity or quality to give me back. If you don't have that, I won't give you something. That we would call it the market economy. Whether we talk about barter or with currency, okay, market economy means the condition of reciprocity. We can also call it symmetrical economy. But in small communities, whether we talk about the family or your sports team or your working peers when you work in a company also, you don't invoice your colleagues with the time you spent with them. When we go in small environment, in holoptical environment, in original collective intelligence, we naturally play in the gift economy. That means I know what I can give, I have a context, and I also know what I receive, and I have a connection of what it means, not just for me or for us, but for the whole as well. That means the holopticism means that I have a sense of the wealth of the collective. Very important to remember that we really get trained, the most natural kind of economy that we know, we call it gift economy, because we learned that. We learn how to play with that. We have a brain design for gift economy as well. Now, remember, I spoke about limitations of original collective intelligence. That means if you look at gift economy as a system, you have a very complex system there. How do we scale it up? Remember, we had to go through a deep crisis, and only the invention of the writing would allow to go to the next scale of complexity. So that question remained true for the economy. You could not have gift economies anymore in pyramidal collective intelligence because with the explosion of number, you can't hold. How can you hold that level of complexity that you have in original collective intelligence in the gift economy? How can you remain holoptical in pyramidal? You lose holopticism. So pyramidal collective intelligence invented something very, very smart, currencies. That means on some piece of support, a clay, paper, whatever, some shell, some stone, you write some symbol that represents some quantity of something that we agree upon. Okay? And so we had the birth of currency. And mostly it came not because of complexity of barter, but it came out of depth. That means I remember that you owe me something, so let's write it down. And this writing has a value, like numbers of stones or shells or something written on the clay, and that can become an asset, a token or a set of tokens that can flow in the community. So it just emerged this way very naturally. And that we call the market economy. That means I will give you something if you have something reciprocal to give me. If you don't have it, or if I don't have what you want, then no deal, it won't happen. That means we have in the middle of a market economy a very important condition here that may block lots and lots of transactions. However, the advantage of market economy says, well, I give you something, you give me something, done. We can forget. We don't have the complexity of the gift economy where we remember through oral tradition, where we remember what happened. Okay, we can just forget it now. We've sealed the deal, done. Okay. What kind of limitations can we see in the market economy? When does it starts to become quite hard?
When the currency moves around, the value of the currency is nothing to be relied upon.
Yes. So when the currency disconnects from Reality.
and value.
Okay.
There's abuse of the market, like a monopoly or a.
The monopoly thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
When the pyramid gets too skewed to the top and pervasive levels of debt prevail.
Mm-hmm. So that leads to a question: why did pyramidal collective intelligence created what we call scarce currencies, or fiat scarce currency? Do you know why? Why do I say scarce currency? Do you think I come from a judgment point of view or a descriptive point of view? Descriptive.
I think it's to create a certain value of the currency
Uh-huh.
to represent value. So if it was in total abundance, I'm not sure how you value it. If it's like air, then you're trading air and everyone's got access to it, then
A market kind of relies on scarcity. If you have an abundant system, you get a good society.
If you get we have so many abundant things out there. However, it still falls into the market and the buy and sell thing. So something else seems to play here. Have you played the Monopoly game? Who has played the Monopoly game? Raise your hand. Okay, who hasn't played the Monopoly game? Shut up, JP. You haven't played the Monopoly game as well? No? Okay. All right. Well, so something very interesting we learned with the Monopoly game when we play the Monopoly game. Yes?
Just 1% can win.
Okay. Well, first we start with a completely egalitarian society. We all have the same amount of money, the same amount of luck, right? No social difference. Then we roll the dice a little bit, and a little bit of randomness, a little bit of good or bad decisions, and you start to have some money difference between the players. Now, here comes the thing. The more I make money, the more I can invest. The more I can invest, the more I make. The more I make, the more I invest, and so on. So the more, right?
fair advantage.
And the less. Because the less money I have, the less I can invest, meaning the more rent I'll have to pay to other players. Okay? Do you know the name of that?
Bias?
The Pareto effect. Pareto distribution, Pareto effect. Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian and sociologist from the end of the 19th century, he traveled the world and visited many countries. And he noticed that regardless the political system, regardless the resources, the belief system, the religious system, the tax system, whatever, you still had somehow 20% of the population controlling 80% of the financial flows, meaning 80% of the wealth, the resources, meaning 80% of the power. Regardless, so it seems that no external factors would really change that kind of proportion. It could influence a little bit, but not that much. And he thought, okay, we may have some equations there, some math there. And he wrote those Pareto equations, the Pareto equations that describes what we call a law of condensation. That means money attracts money. And if money attracts money here, that means the other players out there will become under monetized. That means they still have the wealth. Remember the Monopoly game. They still have the wealth, right? They still have the time, they still have the skills, they still have the hotels and houses and land that they can do commerce with. And we could change that with bananas and fruits and whatever. It doesn't change the whole thing. However, they lack the information system. They don't have enough units to continue to flow, to make those flow happen. So what we learned when we played the Monopoly game at the age of 8 or 10 or whatever, or as adults, we learned the Pareto effect. Sorry.
You say
Pareto. Pareto. P-A-R-E-T-O. Pareto.
this Italian.
Italian guy. Pareto effect. Okay, or Pareto distribution. It has two consequences. First consequence, who wins?
Person who starts off with the most or gets ahead quickest.
The banker.
The banker, the guy who has the most, and of course none. We call it in the game theory, we call it a collective death game. Because even if I have all the banknotes and the other players around the table, well, they get economically dead, and me too. I can't engage anymore economically. So I have all these banknotes, and they become useless. Unless I change the laws, I make a new distribution and all these things. I can do that. I can change the rules. But if I keep by the rules, then we have a collective death. And hence the reason why we call it scarce currencies. Because of that, because of the Pareto distribution, that concentrates in the hands of the few by law, by a law of distribution, and then most people experience scarcity out of that. Second consequence also, imagine you put the wisest person on earth around the board, the game board. Well, their wisdom will, you just ask them to play, but their wisdom won't help. They will end up with rich and poor.
They might just share the money.
They may change the rules. Right. They may decide, let's share the money. They may even decide, let's put a tax system. And they will discover that the tax system won't stop the Pareto effect. 20 years ago, two French physicists discovered that you can apply any kind of tax system to fiat scarce currency. You will always end up with Pareto effect. And if you add interest on top of that, that makes a huge accelerator to the whole thing. Now,
What about the redistribution?
the redistribution,
Would that work in the Pareto system? An automatic redistribution, when it gets accumulated at the top too much, you start redistributing to the
That's what
bottom?
tax is meant to be.
Well, yeah, but
tax should do that.
mm,
However, where have you seen societies where it would completely accomplish the whole distribution? In some countries, it does it better than others, but in the end, you do have the law, the condensation law that happens.
And
what about
socially,
what about non-conditional income for everybody? We're voting on that in Switzerland in June, actually. Everybody gets like 2,500 a month. Would that change?
wow.
Some will keep it, some will choose to spend it. Some will choose to invest that money, some will choose to spend it on vacations, and it will be the same thing.
It depends if they've been given it or if they're creating it themselves. I think the way to redistribute is to distribute the power to create money. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
So, thank you. What you guys say, I said is very important. Pyramidal collective intelligence needs this kind of currency that we call scarce currency, of fiat money, where you have an authority that issues, whether this authority, you call it a bank or a government or a lord or whatever, that issues a certain amount of units to, in the social ecosystem for people to play. So they have the authority of the rules, and they use those tokens for the economy, as a language for the economy. But in the end, it will always, by virtue of the Pareto law, it will always end up concentrating in the hands of the few. And that kind of technology works very, very well for pyramidal collective intelligence. We have a very smart technology, because if you want pyramidal structures, please put a scarce currency system. And please put a currency that only addresses certain forms of wealth. And I'll come back to that later.
Yes, I wanted to ask, does it depend on whether the central authority has control over the emission of this currency or not? For example, if there is a gold standard,
Yes.
will there be the Pareto effect?
Yes. Gold standard, you can connect it, as long as you connect it to something scarce with a centralized control on that, you will get the Pareto effect. And by the way, the Pareto effect, I don't see it as mean. The Pareto effect happens everywhere in nature. Our planet exists because of Pareto effect. The matter attracts the matter, that attracts the matter, and then you have a planet, right, or a sun, okay? But what happens as the bad side in living systems happens when the whole part of the rest of the population doesn't have access to the tool, to the tokens anymore. So we want to think of the next form of collective intelligence, the holomidal collective intelligence. Does it need scarce currency or not? And my research in collective intelligence says no. The scarce money applies very well for pyramidal, but it does not apply, it becomes even toxic for holomidal. We need we start to build very, very complex, holistic living societies that need to integrate with the environment, that need to speak a language of multi-level forms of wealth, in which conventional money or conventional tokens, whether you say bitcoins or dollars or whatever, won't suffice. It won't suffice to express what comes next. So I would like to share now some ideas about what we call integral wealth. Have you heard that before? The term integral wealth? Yes? So let's look at some case. You see, in order to, as a researcher and working with many other people, thinking of what would the next society need in regards to technology and its economy, we needed to really step back and ask ourselves those fundamental questions. What do we call wealth? Because you see, in our language structure, in our ontological structure, if I say, hey, this guy there is wealthy, what do we think? We think he has what? Money, right? We don't think about, does he enjoy his free time? Does he have a good health? Does he love what he does? Or all these other forms of wealth? We just confuse wealth and money. Interesting to see that every pyramidal collective intelligence society that I've seen so far, they have this ontological confusion between wealth and money. That means they have projected the multidimensionality of wealth into one single dimension, one line, called money, or tokens, or bitcoins. It doesn't matter what kind of units you play with. So we had to step back a little bit and really try to understand, what do we really call wealth? And we came up with amazing discoveries there. So let's take some examples. If I take 1 kilo of potatoes, or a car, or electrons, electricity, well, that kind of wealth, we feel very familiar with that because it goes from one hand to another. We can call it movable wealth. Parts, numbers, things that really go from one place to another, one person to another, they have physicality in it. Then another kind of wealth, for instance, ecological footprint, or biodiversity. You go in the forest here and you count how many insects and birds and animals you have there, and plants and so on. Or you do a blood test and you look at the numbers of platelets there, or whatever you have in the blood. Or you check the quality of of a fruit, for instance. You count how many calories or things like that. All these things, we call it measurable wealth. The wealth that you can measure. You don't buy and sell it. You measure it. Okay? And time as well, as an example. Third form of wealth. You do well, in your company and you get a gold medal for something, or you do the Olympics and you get, first, second, or third seat, or you become the best seller of your organization, whatever. That, we call it rankable wealth. That means the performance compared to other performance represents some wealth. You certainly want, a better fruit than another fruit. You certainly want a better company than this other company, or this better seed than another seed, and so on. So we rank things all the day to compare them and to decide, oh, this one I prefer compared to the other ones. In the Olympics, for instance, on the 100 meters, we rank speed, but on ice skating, we rank not speed but style. Okay. Why don't we rank style for running? We could do that as well. So in ranking, actually, we decide a certain set of parameters and settings to put a ranking among different systems. And then the fourth form of wealth, harmony, trust, joy, pleasure, all these things that come from the subjective self, we call it acknowledgeable wealth, because it has to come from our subjective expression. I love spending this time with you. We went to a delicious restaurant out there. And by the way, I can put a certain number of stars to this restaurant. I could express that, but it needs to come from a subjective expression of the wealth. So let me recap that, because it may feel a little complex, but let's go there. I spoke about movable wealth. Example, potatoes. I spoke about measurable wealth. Example, ecological footprint. I spoke about rankable wealth. Example, number one is something. And I spoke about acknowledgeable wealth. Example, trust. Now you notice that I've made circles there because you have inclusive relationship. You see my potatoes here. If I go reverse, any kind of wealth that you see in the circle here exists because I acknowledged it as such, right? Potatoes, I like them. I declare them as wealth for me, or apples, or anything else, right? I may declare that ecological footprint, I acknowledge it as wealth, right? Now, if I move on, some of these different forms of wealth, you can see them as acknowledgeable and rankable. You can't rank trust, but you can certainly rank some systems. And some of this wealth, you can see them as acknowledgeable, rankable, and measurable. And some of them, a very small part, acknowledgeable, rankable, measurable, and movable. What I want to share now is the most important thing. We have, the currencies we have developed so far, what do they serve for? Which kind of wealth do they serve for?
Movable.
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 Exactly. And for the rest of the other forms of wealth, we've remained mostly in oral traditions, or we use sometimes some numbers, but completely disconnected with one another. Like, yeah, we have numbers for ecological footprint. Yes, but not connected to movable or rankable or acknowledgeable. Whatever language we have, they kind of play separately in those different circles. They don't connect. And that does not represent our true reality, because in the true reality, we connect all these things. I'll buy more of your bread because you have a good reputation, because I like you as a person, or because you really make good bread. So I have to acknowledge that, or because I trust you, whatever, So you have a link between your reputation and how much bread I'll buy to you, for instance, in the market economy, if we still continue to do these things. Does that make sense? I'd like to stop here a little bit. If you have any questions or feedback about this whole thing.
There's no kind of time. This feels to me like it's across time. It's not like this hasn't developed much, this model. It's just that's how it's been for a long time. Is that true?
Yes. Wherever you look at, that really, we can talk about a universal map of wealth, because whether you look at, Amerindians or people in Africa, depending on whatever period, original collective intelligence or pyramidal, it doesn't matter. We have this relationship to wealth. And by the way, I should have also say something here and added something here. Outside here, we could also call it potential wealth. The things that haven't happened yet, but we want them to manifest and then to come inside our individual and collective reality. So something I'd like to just add here, let me replay that. You see, if we start to think integral wealth, it may look very abstract right now, but if you really integrate that inside yourself, you will see that we already have a little bit of that, and we can become very aware of thinking the world, seeing the world, speaking the world through integral wealth, which means designing our next systems in a way that they speak to integral wealth and not just a small, tiny part of wealth. Let's look at an example. You see we have aloe vera here, and I could take an apple or anything, as a first resource. So movable, yes, okay. I took it, I have something in my hand, right? But then I can ask myself, this aloe vera, what kind of nutritive or healing qualities does it have? I can count, I can measure some things, does it have chemicals in it? What kind of vitamins and properties, so I can measure some wealth. Then I start to talk more than just kilos or quantities, right? And then I can also ask myself, well, compared to other forms of aloe vera or other forms of plant, I can also rank that compared to other things. And that ranking also will express some form of wealth. And then, of course, I can acknowledge that. That means I can say, I love this plant, or it does an incredible work on me, or I'd love to have them in my gardening, or we want it because it will enrich the ecosystem out there. Just, we can speak to that, okay? So you see, when we start to become integral, when we start to speak integral wealth, that gives us the fundamentals for designing the next language of wealth, in which if we play only with dollars or any kind of tokens, and I include bitcoins, we will keep playing by the old economy. So I don't say we should not do bitcoins, by the way, because it really helps for the transition. You move from centralized creation of tokens to decentralized. So that I really see it as a very big step. However, I came here to talk about post-monetary. That means we want to see beyond the first original language that we've learned since pyramidal collective intelligence, where we see reality only with those tokens, whether we call them dollars or euros. We describe all this reality only through that. We need now an integral language, a much more complex language, to go into integral wealth, where we can connect all these different parts together. We can connect the ecosystem with our transactions. We can connect our human experience with what we do. We can connect how we organize our value systems through rankable wealth with how we will move parts out there, and so on. We need to connect all these things. That means we need to build integral systems. And when I say we, of course, I see it as the next step for humanity, and also the network of people I work with. We try to think, okay, how could we design such a system? Does the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency provide enough today for what we see as the requirements for that next society? And so far we see no. The blockchains certainly represents the next step, but the next transitional step, not the big thing. And we want to try to see the big thing. Yes?
Could you re-explain the blockchain and the Bitcoin, the way it works?
Sure, I can do that. Or Sion should you should do that.
Or Manu, yeah.
Please. Would you want to do that?
I do that very briefly.
Please.
Can you repeat the question? Yeah, it was to re-explain what is the Bitcoin and the blockchain and how it works.
So the blockchain is the underlying mechanism that allows for Bitcoin to work. It's how the different transactions that occur on the Bitcoin network are joined together, and they are linked like chain links through cryptography, which means you can't go back in time and change the past history. So it creates a immutable, unchangeable history of transactions. And that blockchain technology has been used for lots of other technologies, lots of other things, like you can create a notary system that shows who bought or sold what bit of land, and it's immutable, it's unchangeable. So that's really what the blockchain gives you. Bitcoin is a decentralized, community-created money system. So it's not centrally created by one group of people or one person. It's created by anyone that wants to plug their computer into the Bitcoin network, and in exchange for supporting the network with their computer running, they get Bitcoins in return. And a lot of people have tried to create currencies outside of the central bank currencies and haven't achieved much success with it. But Bitcoin did that by being distributed. It's a distributed system. It's running on lots of different computers at once, not just one computer. So it's very hard for it to be broken or taken offline. You can't just break one computer. You'd have to switch off or corrupt all the different Bitcoin machines running all over the world. Is that helpful?
And in the system, it seems that the concern for me is the bias towards those who are technically able. So you look at the people who have the 20-80-20 rule, those who have access to the technology, any part of the world, get the most computers, can generate the most, they become the new 20%. Even people who have a lot of money and don't know the technology and hire somebody else clever to do it, they can leverage, but it's still, that 20 just replaces. And you know, the big person, old person out here in Bali with an old phone, they've got no, they're not ever going to be a player in that system. And anyone who's really smart, but technology wouldn't, they're falling into that 80% of have-not. So it's got its own biases. It just replaces one for another.
There's like a new thing in Japan. So a lot of Japanese housewives are sitting, like they're mining bitcoins. That's what I heard.
Yes.
But they will be the
Miners.
exceptions. You know, the person in the Balinese field cannot do that. You know, like it's their race against the big people who can do big lots of stuff. It's just another system replacing one
It's
for
creating
another.
a technocracy.
I think it's I like the language. I always said Pareto, but Pareto. You know, it's just one system. You just train one thing.
It's good for cold climates because you can just use them.
That's right.
So helpful here.
Someone wanted to say, I'm sorry. Raised, yes?
Your question about the model, you were talking about in the future coming up with a system, a new system of measure, no, a system, new system of wealth. But how can you have a unified system of wealth when, for example, the final level of knowledgeable wealth is very subjective. It is probably theoretically impossible for what is wealthy for me is not the same as what is wealthy for you. How is that possible?
So, well, by virtue of communities, because communities agree on things that they acknowledge, you know. For instance, if we connect you and I because we collect stamps, and we don't feel that interested in measuring the ecological footprint because that kind of, we don't see it as well. So we don't need even to measure that, to rank that, but we certainly have a way to rank some stamp values upon some objective criteria, and then also to acknowledge why do we prefer this stamp to the other, because, and then in another community they don't give a shit about stamps, right? And so you want to allow this huge natural ecodiversity of human beings to coexist and also to interact, which means the magic word, interoperable. When you look at a forest, for instance, look how many different species we have out there, and they still play together, they interact. So that means we have some kind of hidden protocol out there that makes all these different species with different realities and different needs and different behaviors work and operate together and build a coherent ecosystem. So we step back and started to ask ourselves, in complex adaptive system, what can we see that makes all this diversity work together?
So you're suggesting almost like a protocol, some kind of mirror where the way I see the value from that mirror versus the way you see it from the mirror is very different. It's same protocol, same system or something, but the output of that is different depending on individual or the groups of humans.
So that leads to the next part where I can share now a little bit of the insights we have to look at those hidden laws, like why do atoms work together and why do forests and ecosystems work together and complex societies work together. What can we see as common in all these different systems and different layers? And if we're interested in that, that gives us even more very precise requirements for whatever technologies we want to design. Because if we can have a language or a meta-language or maybe a protocol of protocol, then we solve the whole thing for the next societies, for sure. So let me go there a little bit. So we started to really ask ourselves what kind of language any kind of living systems may have. And we came up with one first big insight that we call grammatic capacities. Somehow, it doesn't matter whether you talk about bacteria, cells, and DNA, or even electrons, and trees, and all living systems, regardless of the level of complexity, they seem to have a grammar, something that allows A and B to communicate, agent A and agent B, being A and being B to communicate through a grammar, something that they both understand and that allows some kind of meaning and transactions to flow, regardless, again, the level. So we came up then with also this other big word that you will hear more and more that we call composability. You see, for instance, here I use phonemes to speak with you. I have a certain set of phonemes, I don't know how many, maybe 50 or something, it depends on the language, but then I can compose them. And that composability creates a very high range of variations from which I can build meaning. And you look at all human beings and all human societies, how many languages do we have? But we all use phonemes. All of us, all human beings will use phonemes to communicate, at least through voice. So you see, we have something, an underlying level of composability called phonemes that allow all the different languages at the local level, very different from one another. They don't understand one another, but at the lower level, we have something in common. Okay? So we have that property called composability. The alphabet, the DNA, all these things, you can see them as composable abstractions. You can describe some level of reality through that. So let's continue. We discovered 4 big principles that work together: carrier, agent, protocol, and signal. Carrier, agent, protocol, signal. And I'll give some examples of that. I hope it will give you enough, strong material to continue to reflect on what comes next. If I go with carrier, carrier means some support, like a piece of paper, on which I will write some variations, some signals. I will use that. I can use a piece of paper to write something. I can use the air, just like right now, as a carrier to communicate, on which I send some phonemes. I could use electricity as a carrier, electrons, okay? Or we can use molecules as a carrier for DNA. So first thing, we need some kind of support on which we will make variations on this support. The second thing you need an agent. An agent means something or some being or some agent, to really put a neutral name on that, that will transform the status of the signal. For instance, you may have here, some sound waves, and you transform it into a digital signal. An agent would do that. I speak to you, I send phonemes, it arrives in your ear, in your inner ear. You have those very tiny hair that vibrates, that then transforms into electromagnetic signals, and it goes in your brain. And we have many agents transforming those things and building upper meaning. It happens everywhere. Another example, a pen. You can see it as an agent because it transforms what you can see on the sheet of paper. Okay? Or a sound device. Or a chip also. You have some electrons that are right there, and it has an input and then an output. All these things, you can see them as agents. DNA, of course, as an agent, if I go in the biological world. Then I spoke about a protocol. The protocol defines the range of variations and the rules. For instance, in many languages, you would have this structure. You need to put a subject and a verb and an object. In many, many languages, okay? Or how you will use the phonemes. For instance, with my phonemes, I can speak with my human voice, but I can certainly not make the sound of an engine, of a car engine, or an elephant, right? Or what do you hear here? I can't do that with my phonemes. So I have a protocol that defines the possibilities and the rules, how I will put those things together. Same if we use electrons. Well, computers will work with plus 5 volts or 0 to make the ones and zeros together. And of course, in the DNA, you have those 4GT and AC that define all the DNA language. And the last one, signal. Signal, that means once you've produced through the protocol as an agent, through the carrier, then you have a signal like a line of text or music, or a speech, or ones and zeros in computers, or of course, those whole DNA, the genes, and so on, in the biological language. So you see, it doesn't matter where you look at, whether you look at matter, biology, chemistry, cells, bacteria, or complex ecosystem like a forest, or living societies, human societies, you will always come up with carrier, agent, protocol, and signal. And so what we try to build, what we would call a protocol of protocol. Let's go a little further now. And I'll stop here after that so we can really engage in a more interactive conversation. In the future world, if we want to go beyond the market economy with all the flaws and limitations that we've seen, well, maybe we can imagine that if I want to, let's say, drink 1 liter of coconut water like I did just before coming here, delicious coconut, I had to pay a certain number of tokens for that. But it does not connect with the rest. It doesn't create a feedback loop up to, let's say, the tree and the forest and the people who make the glass. And nothing said, can I drink it or not? Because maybe if I drink it, it'll take it from the global resources, and we don't know that. Maybe I should not drink it because it may affect the environment in this specific time of the year. Or maybe some other people need it more than I do. So you see, for any action of the things that I receive or give, it remains isolated. We don't have a composable abstraction language that shows the whole chain of consequences that it may have for the environment, and that does not embody the value system we may decide as a community whether I can take this thing or give this thing or not. Okay? So in the future, we may think of those chains of agents that will see right away whether I can take something or not, or give something or not, according to the global impact or consequence it may have. But that means a very complex information system in which we need carriers, agents, protocols, and signals. Those things that I talk about may look like science fiction, but it already happens in our brain. It already happens in the forest. They didn't need CEOs and centralized powers to exist, right? Something self-organizes it. Carriers, agents, protocols, and signals, always. So what if we build information systems? And what if we design those next information systems, those protocol for protocol? That means some language that allows a community, some protocol that allows some community to create its own protocols. You understand what I mean? We want to go there. Yes.
I have a. Well, do you want people to absorb that first? Because I have a question, and I just wonder if there's something missing in this floor, but I don't want to. And you could maybe. Do you want to carry on talking?
I suggest I stop here first because I've spoken a lot and put on the table. So we can go further, but let's stop here and not define our. We want to go with what I shared. Do you feel okay with that? And we go into more. I don't know what time we have to leave the room. What understanding do we have? And of course, people want to leave. You feel free to leave, and maybe a small group and stay. So let's go interactive. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe just me, but I'm about to grasp your final point, but I'm not exactly there yet. So you could maybe just add a few more infos about it.
Well, I don't get there myself exactly. Of course, who can, right?
I followed you till this point. Just the final. The final thing is not here. I can't even specify.
It's really great that you say that. And yet it sounds like you're dealing with a second language as well. So, to follow all this is awesome.
So let me try from another angle. And again, I know the limitations of what I said because we talked about things that don't exist yet. So I can't help going super abstract. Okay. A long time ago, let's say the monkey. Let's think of the monkeys here in the forests. Around them, they have pieces of wood, pieces of rope, and stones. Do they make bows out of it? They don't. They don't have the language for that. You need a specialized language and an abstract language to have this capacity to build some level of complexity. And so human beings could do those complex things because they created a new protocol that we call verbal language that had a level of abstraction sufficient enough so that we could describe things that we don't even yet have in our hands. We can project them, we can imagine them, we can describe how they work, and then we can share a social reality about their physics and how to build them, how to improve them, and so on. Okay? So language really enhanced a new level of carrier agent protocol and signal based on top of what we already had as agent protocols and signal. But it brought us to the next level of complexity and potential. Right? Now it seems that we hit a wall again. Pyramidal collective intelligence hits a wall. It has created too much complexity. Verbal and written language also hits a wall. The mental mind hits a wall. We know that the rational mind, the mental rational mind hits a wall. Somehow we need to go, we want to go, we feel an evolutionary trend, something that attracts us to a new kind of language. But when I say language, then we usually think, like a new language like Japanese and French and Indonesian, and what next? Or we think, oh, what new C++ or / whatever coding language. I talk about something meta, as abstract as verbal language may look for monkeys. But I really speak from my guts here, from my experience. Like we feel that the verbal language and the written language, what you see here on this screen, it won't move. If I want to change that, if I want to make it evolve, I have to put an action on it. I have to change the words, type something on my keyboard, voice something to someone. But once it goes on a piece of paper or on the screen, it won't change. It doesn't have a form of life or intelligence in them. Very likely, those new phonemes, those new signals, or those new protocols that we will have, they will have their self-capacity to self-evolve, co-evolve, as living systems themselves. We see that. I mean, I feel it,
So you talk, so when you say you see it coming, you feel it coming, are you thinking kind of AI and Internet of Things, and is that what you're kind of feeling and seeing, or is it something beyond that? Because I can get that.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I can't imagine.
What I'm hearing, just for your summary, what I'm hearing in the beach is that this talk is about the limitations of how we have used a symbol to identify value for us, right? Money has some problems with it. We could replace it with many things, bananas, whatever. But there'll always be 20% who benefit and 80% who don't.
Yeah.
And if we're looking for a system that allows a real representation of what's of value to you and what's of value to him and this person and this community or Bali compared with some other area, we need a whole nother meta language. Meta means bigger, right? A bigger concept of the symbols that will put its arms around what's really of value, not just to you as a person, but to the ecology, the environment, to all the impacts. And the team here is looking to nature, or how does nature do it, such that it can exchange. If you're a molecule or you're an ant and I'm a dead bug, or a bug, or something. How do we exchange what we need?
Yeah.
Or ants in the colony. So that's what the inquiry is, and looking to nature for what these things are. And so there's some reasons for why it needs to be able to develop and move in the shared values that you and your mates might create one little biodiversity, for stamps or cars or food or whatever you're looking at. But it might be slightly different than his community, but they still need to be able to interact, just like as in nature. So what is the symbols, what's the language that would rise above that would let a larger sense of value be used by everybody and create a whole different kind of ability for humanity to interact without the haves and the have-nots and the desperation and scarcity. That's what I hear, yeah?
Bravo.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to build on top of what you said, you see, we've grown up in pyramidal collective intelligence. And we can't imagine how do we say in English?
How to step outside of that concept.
Yeah.
Like even. Oh yeah, good idea.
Well, don't ask me because I don't think in French. So finding the word in French makes it even more difficult. How conditioned? Yes. Okay. We get by living in this kind of matrix. For instance, when we talk about global things, we talk about unified. That means the same thing for everyone, like the same value system, the same government, the same tokens, the same. Because pyramidal collective intelligence hates diversity. It loves unification because when you have a scarce currency, you need to have simplified systems. You need to operate through industrial processes. If you want to make a process more expensive, you have to inject in it more diversity. If you inject in it more diversity, that means the process creating added value will become more expensive. That doesn't play well in the system.
Conquering.
You need to kill this forest and put a monoculture, because that will cost less than if you do horticulture there or permaculture. Okay? You don't want permaculture in pyramidal collective intelligence. However, you do want permaculture and diversity and interactions with all forms of diversity of ideas and beings and forms in holomidal collective intelligence. That kind of collective intelligence needs that. But you can't accomplish that with conventional money or conventional tokens. Yes?
Sorry, I lost the most of the part. How to make connection, this theory in like a small reality, like like mine, for example. I wanna make connection in like a massage business, okay?
Yes.
So how to make connection? Probably yeah, how to make like this a lot of words like the easiest and the next connection.
I mean, you'd see it in the community, wouldn't you? In Bali, the village healer. You live in Bali? No? But, in the Bali community, a person who's a healer could often be taken care of by the rest of the village. There's a value of that without even being spoken. So there are ways that people do it without even running.
Like
I'm going to let you answer that, but I'm just going to say you could look to, people do this now. And to look at it as how you come up with a scalable system is part of where the system is.
Let's make a handball, tomorrow I will decide, okay, I will do in this way, be more productive, but at the same time, like a more grow. Yeah. So, what will be the first step? Like I go at home and I will do what? Like,
I have examples. I don't know if you have examples. You're a researcher, so I listen to you. But you well, I mean, I'm thinking that as a massage person, did you say massage?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you just take from the same amount of money from JP as you do from this person, this person, this person, you're only looking at one level of transaction, right? And you give them the same massage. If you say, actually, this person is more sick, and I'm going to spend more time with them. So, and they bring a certain value to me because I learned just by working with them. So I'm going to charge them less. because I'm going to make a different arrangement with this person because they bring me this value. You're already starting to look at a different arrangement of values. You understand? Well, but let's just sit with it a little bit a while. So if each thing has a larger picture of the exchange, then you're not narrowing everything down to a point, and you can say you get something. You understand? So on a practical level, some of us are already doing this. We're saying, I'm going to help this person with their website because I love them and I want them to succeed. This man over here has lots of money. He doesn't need it. He's got it somewhere. I'm not going to be available to him. In fact, he can't pay me $1 million to work on my site. So, I mean, people are already making these decisions. But it's how to, I think it's useful to not, you can do certain, I think we can do certain things in our day. And is leaping ahead expecting to be able to use a piece of software before it's been created yet. It needs a certain time to come up with a system that's going to work for everybody across the board. Anyway, next conference.
It almost sounds like you're kind of going back to a formal economy.
Well, only because he talked about in his own local world without any structures in place. But a team like this was really looking at, okay, how does it work in nature? What systems and structures could we put in place? Then we have something we can work with outside your local economy. So, you step by step, let's figure out one piece at another,
So just to build up that question, what would be the time scale for something like this? Because it took going from the collective original intelligence to the pyramidal structure that has been discussed, that took thousands of years from the initial village to the pharaoh of Egypt and the Roman Empire. That took many thousands of years to develop. What, in your opinion, would be kind of the time scale of that's needed for the evolution to evolve from abstraction to something very concrete and systematic?
First, the technology itself, this protocol, which has a name today, we call it Scepter, by the way, CEPTR.org. You can go to scepter.org. It may really come to reality in the next few years, just a matter of years. And we have a plan for that, which I can share here. We work today on something very simple, a protocol, but that we call Streamscape. You see, we have in our communication structures like email and SMS and Facebook messages and Messenger, all these flows and Twitter and all these flows of messages that we have already a complex ecosystem of protocols, by the way, right? With carrier signals and protocols, and they kind of play separately. So we want to take this kind of simple ecosystem that yet looks complex to us, but provide through Streamscape, an interface and a user experience that works with a Scepter technology that unifies through a protocol that unifies all this protocol and that helps you have smart communication with your peers and not different channels. You won't even think of those different channels anymore. You will decide who you want to speak with. You won't even need to worry about the how and all these different things. Once we've accomplished this first ladder, then we can go into decision making. Because if you want to design a currency system, before you go into currency design, you need a community of people, and that speaks to your question.
Is this on the website, by the way? Is this on the website?
Yeah, I'll give you the information. You need a community of people who start to think and discuss about their value system. What do we value as wealth together? Do we value the monkey forest out there? Do we want to have cars in our city, or how much? What kind of schools do we want? What do we do with water? What do we do with the land? All these things. So a community needs to first speak on their value, and according to their value, they will design a currency constellation. That means they will put together different forms of currencies made to represent the flows they want to work with and their value system in a dynamic way. Okay?
Is this an example of reality using this system?
I'll get back to that. Let me finish with that. So before we go into the third ladder, we need something that will help communities to build efficient decision-making things. I mean, how do we decide to make decisions together? Do we do it by vote? Do we do it by consensus? Do we do liquid democracy? How do we connect our decision-making system with the actions we do in the community and so on? So we need to go in this first and the second level to provide technology for decision-making systems. And then that will provide the fundamental bricks for people to design currency constellation. Examples, they may say, okay, let's design a mutual credit system, so with tokens for the movable wealth, because we want to keep in the market economy by choice, and we want to give people a different range of credits in the mutual credit system based on the reputation. And so reputation, we will also call it a currency that represents a form of wealth that we call reputation. By the way, we make a very strong difference between currency and money. A currency represents any kind of form of wealth, a language of wealth. For instance, the numbers of thumbs you may have on Facebook, we call it a currency. If you consider the biodiversity around here a value for you, we will call it a currency because it represents some form of wealth. So when I talk about creating a currency constellation, that means you decide, first you do what we call a wealth assessment. That means you decide together, what do we consider as wealth in our community? Free time, school, health, biodiversity, whatever, you decide. And once you have decided, you will do a currency design where you decide what you want, what wealth you want to represent through those currencies, and how you want to interconnect them. For instance, how can you, a very simple case that we see in many places in the world, how do you connect a reputation system with a credit that you give to people? Just that simple. And then what kind of reputation? How do you build reputation? Do you come up with a reputation from scratch, or do you build it with your peers? Through what value system do you build a reputation? You see? So this design, we call it building a currency constellation. Now, to answer your question, we have today many of what we call complementary currencies around the world. Estimation between some people say 5,000, some people say more. Okay, but you just have to Google complementary currencies, and you have whole literature about it, and you have very skilled people here in this room. And of course, I think Stephen here, who can really tell you lots of things about complementary currencies. As their name says, they complement the system. That means you still have the mainstream conventional money, but it helps you build your first brain muscle to think outside of the box and to think, how could we design a currency system that works better than the conventional money? And that will address your first questions from the ground. And then you will get to the next step and realize, well, I did some complementary currency stuff, but why do I need money anymore? Because I see the flaws of money. So couldn't we design one currency that replaces money? But you will still think in the box of the one currency for the trade or movable wealth. And then, but you will go there, and then you will hit a wall with some limitations, because you will think, oh, why do I work with one currency? Because we have so many forms of wealth: movable, measurable, rankable, acknowledgeable. So maybe we want to represent different values for different forms of wealth and connect them systemically through our value system that express our value system. Like, how do we influence your credit limit with your reputation, as an example? Or how do you connect the things you do for the ecological footprint in your local city or community to your reputation? Things like that. So you start to put a reputation, a value system into motion. So you will go there. So you will start to see wealth in an integral way, and currencies as a language for integral wealth. You see, I just described the different steps of the journey you have ahead of you if you start from zero. You will go through those different steps. And in the end, you will see, well, we do this complex thing in our community, and this community does these other things out there with different value systems. and we cannot communicate together. So we need some kind of meta protocol there, so that all this eco-diversity of values and communities and ecosystems, they can communicate together. And that will lead you there, to what I shared today. Sorry, and you will probably go into the next ladder of the scale. That means you want to build holoptiness, remember? Tools that provide augmented holopticism. That means that we can see the stage of our community, but also the stage of the whole region, the state also, what have we accomplished, and maybe the state of the world. That leads also to the OS Earth.
What's the OS Earth? One
The
one
operating system that really
operating system
allows
here.
us to play at the same time locally and globally. Okay, but that will come by emergence, not because we designed it. It will just happen by emergence. I want to check the time here. Maybe the people who want to leave, and people who want to stay. So feel free to just to make
I think
sure.
we have more time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vito is not.
Okay.
Breathing down on it.
Yeah, he's not asking us to leave. I think we're okay.
Can I ask about the integral wealth system?
Thanks for coming.
If we're going to design
Thanks,
different
Chinese.
protocol,
I couldn't hear you.
if you want to design a different protocol for to represent the value expressed by integral wealth, what is the protocol for the integral wealth system? Say like you have the chart that sort of it looks like the relationship between the different levels of wealth are inclusive. So
concentric circles.
yeah, so the circles like they are the outer circles they're inclusive of the inner circles, but why aren't they isolated circles? And why aren't they overlapping circles? So what is the protocol here to determine the importance of different levels as well?
I don't think I understand your question. Sorry.
Okay, so
Yeah. Maybe someone understands.
Are you saying this is a hierarchy in a way of development, like saying this one encompasses that and this one gets bigger and bigger? Why aren't they overlapping subsets? What makes that one more inclusive than another one?
So
Is that what
like
you're asking?
I think the relationship between the five four levels determines the protocol of integral wealth.
Right.
So in a sense, like, can we design the protocol of integral wealth, or do we take this model and then design protocols that becomes currencies and values?
Because you're even questioning this hierarchy in a sense. You look at this as a hierarchy.
Relationship.
This relationship,
Yeah.
that this is bigger than this and acknowledgeables on the outside. And
Right, because
so
like,
you're not comfortable with that. Does that look limiting? Are you
Well-
seeing something else if it was side by side and then look at it as
I think there could be a diverse set of ways of designing relationships, but then they become like diverse
Yeah.
protocols that then become diverse currencies. So like how do you tackle that? And whereas like because of like in the end like it's a decentralized value system, then what do we agree on as the protocol?
That speaks to really the next meta language, because in our team we talk about a protocol of protocol, actually. That means it allows any community to create their own protocol. We go meta, just like verbal language went meta compared to the previous language of just signs and sounds and just what we know from the wildlife out there. So we really try to think of protocol of protocol. That means that community here will organize, will decide how to link those different forms of wealth and use some kind of protocol. But if you want all these different protocols to work together, you need a meta protocol. That means something that allows the design of protocols, a protocol of protocols. So we work on that. But I mean, I could go there, but then we go very, very.
And you might be able to create one
some
that would let other circles not be this concentric model. You might be able to, in that protocol, if you created one expansive enough to make room for her, what she's imaging, right?
Well, here, we just mapped the territory here. You can't change. I mean, you can design whatever you want.
Seems to be a truth. Yeah.
Wherever you look at, you will see those things. Now, where you see variations, you may see some people here who acknowledge, who have a way to acknowledge wealth in a different way. Think again of different communities in the world. Let's take two extreme examples, like the stamp collectors and the Bali community. Stamp collectors, you have a worldwide community, and they acknowledge things that, very different from what the Bali community here would want to do, right? But you still have this, what we call hierarchy at play. It doesn't change.
I had one thing that I couldn't see. I don't know. Kind of sort of relates to yours, but I'm not sure if it will enlighten or just be a side offshoot that's not quite new. But I had a question about, when you had you had the protocol, the signal, the carrier, the agent. I just wonder if there should be where do you fit in the action or the context or the receiver? Like, if this friend here buys something from me, or the coconut example, if you buy the coconut to drink it, and you're wanting it for health and, whatever, that could be very different than this man buying the coconut to use as a weapon, right? And one might sell differently to you based on this, and it would actually have a whole different set of values based on how you're going to use it. And I wasn't sure how you would put that in your, I mean, the protocol could allow for it, but what's it calling? If that's not agent, it's not paper, it's not transported. It was like, where do you fit in the usury of something? So, I mean, there's just, in 2 seconds, and this is not my field, but what if people come up with things like, I've forgotten your name. Lucia. Like, let's say Lucia sees something else that's possible that doesn't, that comes off the side shoot. Allowing for that, which is wonderful. I love what you're talking about, the meta language. It's just more like saying what allows for that adaptability, or things to even be outside this set of, because this is a truth, but there might be something that just comes sideswipes it from another angle. That's like the use of something. Well, where does that fit in this? How do you measure that in this suddenly? It's maybe, those mobiles that hang and they got everything this, and then there might be another piece that just is a whole other dimension. But
Right now you're talking about outside the paradigm of the language of this whole theory.
Yeah, and not to break this, not to break it, because
sure.
this is elegant and beautiful, and I love it.
But
what she's getting at,
that's also a question I have.
like just
because it's of course you're speaking a human language right now. It's from it's expressed in a certain paradigm, right?
Yeah, and the exciting thing, your teams that you're looking at them. I'd love to be in on that conversation, the exploration of how do you come up with a protocol at the higher level that allows for different paradigms to exist within, but it's a meta level, so it's kind of true for all of them, and allows her model to be developed by this community and another community that bases it on energy and feel and who knows what anyway, how cool.
So I don't know if that answered it, and I don't have, I have many questions, but what you bring as questions or insights or feelings also leads to whatever we design. We want to design systems that have capacity to self-evolve, to co-evolve with us, because if as a community we put some hard-coded rules in the system, and then it will need to evolve at some point. Okay. But then we can also get into the old paradigm, like, okay, what elite will decide how the system evolves, which, by the way, happens for the Bitcoin today. Bitcoin works exactly this way. It still has a centralized, architecture. It does not fit the requirements of Alaudo collective intelligence. It certainly provides a transition, but not the end of it. So we want to, in the architecture, and we'll publish some papers very soon, so you will have time to really dig into those things. But we really want a distributed architecture, the protocol also distributed in the architecture. That means not a centralized set of people who decide a given protocol in their community, but also the protocol distributed in the architecture so it can co-evolve. And maybe a part of the community has a new experience of something and can fork or become different or join in a different way, because the protocol also gets distributed, which in the Bitcoin does not happen. You have the distribution of information, data distribution. You don't have protocol distribution. You have centralized protocol. And for us, the big flaws remains there. That's the fact that you have centralized protocol design. And then you need an army of miners to check that you keep the integrity of the system according to the protocol, which also consumes a huge amount of brain power or computer power, CPU power, which we don't need if you distribute the protocol also inside the system. So again, I know I become quite abstract here, but we work on those things. I would like, sorry, because like we have a small circle in the light here, and we don't see the person in the front, in the back who raised their hands years ago. And I would like to honor you.
One of the things that I was, like everything you talk about is fascinating. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and research and whatnot. One of the things that I wanted to raise earlier on, and we kind of just touched on it, was the 20% control 80% of the wealth, and their pushback on any kind of evolution of this type of stuff because they've got their interest to protect, right? So the way we're talking at the moment is if everyone's equal and everyone wants to move forward, which is clearly not the case. What I wanted to take that on is through your research where you go from oral to written technology, what were the difficulties in that happening? Because obviously it's a massive leap forward and it happened at the top and then started going down. But my understanding throughout history is that intellectuals have obviously often been persecuted because of that advancement, and Khmer Rouge did it 30 years ago in terms of that same type of thing. So at that point in time, what were the teething problems and how long did it take for mass adoption to kind of happen? Right? Because obviously it's centralized in a very small community for a long time.
And to add on to that question, this is more like personal. So like when you give talks around the world, do you have to like sort of like avoid going very political, because it's pretty obvious what's going to happen politically if this is going to become a mass adoption thing. Like when you're trying to convince people, so like I think you better be active, you know.
Well, that made it explicit, didn't it?
Any kind of evolution has never asked permission to the previous ecosystem. Never. Right? If you ask permission, because it says, well, the previous ecosystem will just die or collapse. But the collapse also provides the fundamental bricks for the next ecosystem. So we need those, it won't just happen out of the blue. Like we use computers in a way we did not design them first. They did not get designed, and the internet itself, by the way, did not get designed for the way we use it today. We keep hacking, and evolution has always hacked, not just humans. You just use what already exists, and you use it in a different way, in a different purpose, to build the next level of complexity. So now back to the more political side of it. Of course, pyramidal collective intelligence doesn't like it. Pyramidal collective intelligence also will try to put some standards once they realize that, okay, you can't stop the Bitcoin thing, for instance. You bet that the big guys will try to put their hands on the Bitcoin technology and becomes the rulers of those things. So, but at the same time, we got, even with Google and Facebook, we have